Liverpool, that's exciting. Okay, can they get back into the top four now? We sort of touched on it earlier. But now I'm looking at the table thinking, oh, no, they actually could get back into the top four because it's not a million miles away. Yeah, and they've got players coming back.
Well, there's 38 games. They are one of the best teams in the league. They just had a terrible season. There's loads of reasons for it, which there's so many. We've covered it a lot in videos and we'll continue to do so. But like you see, Salah's kind of struggling this season. There's lots to do with the right side. Alexander-Arnold's been targeted a lot this season. They've really struggled with it. John did a great video on the press not functioning the way it wants to. They've got transition of players. They've also had the nucleus of the same players for a long time, and teams tend to need shaken up. And one of the best things that Sir Alex Ferguson did, and that we've seen Guardiola doing now, is getting rid of key players even though they're in their peak, because you need to change things up, if anything, just for the dressing room mentality and psychology, or just to change it so people can't predict what you're doing. Because if Arsenal keep doing what they're doing exactly the same and don't change much, add a couple of players in 2 years' time, and they still got the key core, everyone will know how they play. They won't be as successful. It's what Liverpool have, exactly the same thing. You've got to refresh, add to it, make it different. And Jurgen Klopp appears to be very, very aware of this. This is his 7th year, 8th year, isn't it? And he lasted, was it 7 at Mainz and 7 at Borussia Dortmund, and the last one at Dortmund was a disaster as well, because again, needed to refresh and probably do that sort of stuff. It's what I keep saying Ferguson did so well at Manchester United, was just brutally get rid of players whenever he wanted to, just separate the friendship you have with them and just treat it to be a winner.
Man City do that pretty well as well, because I think there's an interview with Rio Ferdinand and Pep Guardiola where Pep Guardiola's like, how many Premier Leagues did you win? And he's like 5, 6, however many it is, and he's like, was any of those teams like exactly the same team? And he was like, no, you have to constantly change your players up. It's a real skill to be able to do. He also privileged if he can bring in players pretty easily as well, but yeah.
True. I'm sure Jurgen will be desperate to prove that point just to get to that 8th season.
Worth saying that like Liverpool have completely decimated their recruitment department recently, so they've lost Michael Edwards, who was the director of football, and they've moved another few. I think it's Ian Graham, I think his name is, who was in charge of the data side of things. I think they both moved on, so that I think will impact the way that they rebuild the team as well. There's arguments to be made that the players that they brought in haven't necessarily suited the system that or fixed the problems that Klopp's system has.
Well, and that would be a case of he'll maybe need to adapt what he has to what he has available to him, and that's kind of what you touched on in that pressing video, is that you have to change what you do, because you can't just replace Mane with like for like, so you've got to change the way you then press and build and create.
It takes players time, doesn't it, as well? Cody Gakpo's now got a couple of goals in 2 games, so it's starting to see a bit from him. And we should mention Stefan Bajcetic. I knew I wasn't going to pronounce that right, because he looked tidy in midfield, which is somewhere Liverpool could do with a little bit of fresh impetus.
Yeah, that is probably the bit you'd want to refresh. I think I don't want to hammer home on Alexander-Arnold, because obviously he's a really good player and it's been done to death. I think Gary Neville did it best in pointing out how he could be just this elite level right back. But the things that he lacks are so commonly targeted by rival managers that it becomes a real problem, and then detrimental to Mo Salah on the right as well, because he has to come back. Jurgen Klopp, if you watch the side, I often watch what the manager's doing side of the pitch, and the first 20 minutes before Liverpool took the lead in this game, he was going absolutely nuts at what I think was the closest players to him. I think it was Alexander-Arnold and Salah, because when I was looking at them going crazy, you look at the pitch and Alexander-Arnold's out of position and Salah's nowhere to be seen on that right side, and they're in a different transitional shape, getting back into their defensive structure. So I can only assume that's what it was, but that's a case of them going up, and what's worked before isn't quite there. And Alexander-Arnold, it feels very mean to say bad things about him because he gets so much of it from places, but I think a lot of it's really valid, and then he does make up for it by being absolutely brilliant in certain situations as well. He's a fantastic footballer, lovely to watch as well, and you want him in most teams. If he was at Real Madrid or Barcelona, he'd be easily one of their best players as well. But that's the thing. And then you put him into Liverpool against teams like, I know, Newcastle. They target it with players like Alan St-Maximin. He'll take him on 1v1, try and take him on a little trip. When he goes forward, they've got players in position ready to go for that left bit. They'll focus the play on the right to go and lead the team one way so they can target it. And they've done it for years. But weirdly, when I looked at the numbers a long time ago, a lot of the goals they conceded, the chances came from the other wing, where Andrew Robertson is, who is also a brilliant fullback.
Well, I think they push Robertson further forward often, and then so teams target the spacing behind him and then try and hit the back post and overload on Alexander-Arnold.
Mitrovic did it earlier this season, with that back post header. Exactly. And then, so talking about the midfield, what they used to have, the very best Klopp team for me was when you had Fabinho, Wijnaldum and Henderson. That was the main three. Henderson covering for Alexander-Arnold, being a busy little bee in the middle of the pitch. Great,
pressing forward as well, right? He used to just get really high up the pitch as well in pressing moments.
He's like the sort of N'Golo Kante of Liverpool, basically. He's doing loads and loads of work for lots of people. And although he's technically not the best footballer in the world ever, he is so important to how they play. And a lot of football is more about than just being good technically. It's about what you bring to the team as a captain, leader, legend. And then you've got Fabinho, obviously classy player. Wijnaldum, very much box to box. A real classy player, but works very hard and has got the pace to get back and work in transitional moments. And then what they've gone to is Thiago, who is very good technically. His numbers show that he tries to press and win the ball a lot, but doesn't just do it very well. He's not really got a presence defensively, Thiago. You can see him just not quite there. He lacks a lot of speed as well. Henderson's been in and out with injury. It's been a problem. Fabinho hasn't been quite himself as well. He's going in for weird challenges, like easy red cards as well. Don't know what's happened to that guy.
I feel like he's just getting less protection, right? So he just gets into these moments where he's super exposed as well.
And Bayetic seems really neat and tidy. He seems like quite a Barcelona-y player the way he plays. He's got a nice, takes a touch in the half turn, takes players out of the game and then moves it forward. I need to watch him more, but I think I
was talking to Mark Carey of The Athletic about Jorginho Wijnaldum because we were talking about the midfield problem, which is Liverpool always seem to be struggling between having really functional midfields where you can get a huge amount of upside from pressing, or bringing in more talented technical players to then get an upside there. Because I think what they found is that they moved to the fullback system with these two really exciting creative fullbacks creating in different ways because they had a functional midfield, so they needed their creativity to come from somewhere else. Teams then found out how to exploit these really aggressive fullbacks, and so they're much less likely to push their fullbacks as far forward, and so then you have the problem where's our creativity coming from? And again, the solution to that seems to be we need to have we need to bring in more technical players in midfield, and so they seem to be on this cycle of constantly doing that. But I spoke to Mark Carey about Jorginho and Wijnaldum, and he said he tried to profile players who are similar to Wijnaldum. What was because a lot of people say he's sort of a missing piece of that jigsaw, and it was the player he came up with in the Premier League who most closely matched Wijnaldum was Joe Willock of Newcastle.
Is that right?
Interesting.
Well, very box to box player. Classy,
really good out of possession.
Really good technically. He works really hard at possession as well. He's a good player.
This is my theory that Newcastle are the next Liverpool.
I see so many things to it. Yeah.
Well, if Liverpool are to finish in the top four, they'd probably have to do it at Newcastle's expense. So that's an interesting subplot.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.